Once around the park, James, and don't spare the horses.
I leave this place happily and with sorrow in the same breath. And I wish all of you who return and all who come after great success in stewarding this strong, beautiful province we call home. Thank you so much. Merci, miigwech, niao.
Thank you so much.
I will recognize the member on a point of order.
Realized as I was reading my speech that I missed a line or two. And so I really need to acknowledge my partner, Jane Roundthwaite. Oh my God! I swear to God!
Well, that was a moment of, it was, I think, kind of really punctuated Kathleen Wynne's career at the legislature in Ontario. Welcome in. It's On the Ledge. I'm Dave Trafford. It's the Ontario Politics Podcast. And, that was just one moment, I think, yesterday when a number of MPPs had the opportunity to say goodbye to the legislature. A rare moment, a rare opportunity, in fact. And then she got to do that as a former premier. Dave Trafford here with you. It is On the Ledge, as I said, the Ontario Politics Podcast, and our roundtable is assembled. Sabrina Nanji from the Queen's Park Observer. Keith Leslie here is a contributor at CH Television in Hamilton and a longtime observer of what's going on at the park. And John Wright is senior vice president at Maru Public Opinion. Keith, have you ever seen that long list of farewells? I mean, I realize that has happened, but it's not very often that a former premier gets to stand up in the legislature and say goodbye to the Assembly.
There was some really nice speeches. And no, I don't think I've ever seen that many final day speeches back to back. And all of them were quite moving at times, funny, emotional. I thought Premier Wynne, I still call her Premier Wynne, she just was a class act all the time. It reminded me so much of the day after the last election when she lost official party status. And they were down to 7, just decimated. And she held a news conference the next day. In the last time, I guess she was going to hold one in the government caucus room. And just before that news conference started, she went around and she shook every one of our hands, all the media waiting around. That was the end of her term.
And we weren't always kind to her.
No.
Right?
No. And Ford had made some comments about how irrelevant the media were, and someone asked her about, the relationship between the government and the media, and she gave just a really nice, touching anecdote, and again, stressing the importance of the media. It's been a few years since we heard that from a premier. So again, very touching speech. I also wanted to mention Norm Miller, the son of a former premier. His dad was known for wearing his red tartan jacket in the legislature, and Norm donned it yesterday. For his final
nice
speech. I thought that was a very nice touch as well. And he was, kind of the opposite of his dad. He was a much quieter politician than his dad ever was. But he was still a very effective man and really well known and well liked.
Yeah, most would be a little quieter than Frank was. He was a big personality. Sabrina, I know that a lot of this is going on, and what struck me about Kathleen Wynne's speech, not only the self-deprecating part of the end, oh my God, I forgot to mention my partner, but there was a whole tone of honoring public service in a bipartisan way. We're going to play a clip at the end, just kind of how she capsulizes her own experience and some of the fun that was there, some of the trauma that they experienced, she as the premier experienced. But I think she really personalized for many of us what it means to be in public service, particularly in political life.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was, classy, as Keith put it, that she gave props to Tim Hudak, the former PC leader who was in the House, kind of cracked a couple of jokes about him as well. And she kind of turned some of her, I guess, the heckles into, the basis of her speech. I remember when she was first, one of the few liberals who managed to hold on to their seats, one of the seven in 2018, she was kind of relegated. Now she sits at the very back in the corner, kind of in the House. That seemed like, a bit of a dig. And the conservatives had heckled her, why are you even here after the liberals were, just trounced in 2018. And she kind of decided to flip that a little bit and lean into it, which I thought was kind of a badass move. She acknowledged it. I was heckled. Why am I here? And I'm here to tell you guys why I'm here. And she gave a really flowery explanation about the importance of democracy and representing people in Don Valley West. And, a lot of her legacy and big things that she wants to be remembered by. I mean, don't forget, she's the first female premier, first openly gay premier. I thought it was really cool when she had her portrait. Every former premier gets a portrait at Queen's Park. And she wore a pink suit in hers, which, I think for a lot of young women, a lot of girls, school tours that are coming to Queen's Park, seeing that there, it's really inspiring. And it was kind of this moment, I think, of camaraderie that we rarely see in the House. There's always this political partisan heckling going back and forth. So it was really a nice kumbaya moment to have all these outgoing MPPs, have their say in the House. I'll mention Bill Walker too. I think he was so candid, so funny, thanking everybody from, the legislative pages to, his chief of staff. He joked to his work wife, cracking jokes with the speaker. Walker himself is a deputy speaker. He's just an all around nice guy. I was genuinely laughing out loud. I would highly recommend if you guys have time, go check out the speeches. They've got the replays. Go read Hansard. Just a nice moment, I think, before the drama and the mudslinging of the campaign that's going to come up in a couple of weeks.
Well, and I think that's it. And, the whole tone that the House could sort of, rise and finish the week on that sense of camaraderie. And John Wright, as you put it there, two sword lengths apart. And the premier, former premier, Kathleen Wynne, actually referenced that, that in her final speech. She commented on, that's where we are. We're two sword lengths apart. And she finishes by saying, no matter where you are, where you come from, I know you're here because you care about the people in your community. You care about your constituents. You care about their livelihood, etc. And I love you for that, even though, let's face it, we're going to disagree on many things. But it struck such an important tone, I thought.
Yeah, two things about that. It was interesting because oftentimes, as you know, people who are leaving politics never get a chance to give that speech. I mean, they've already called the election, they're off, and it's bye-bye. But the speaker allowed all of them who were leaving, including Chris Elliott, to make a final speech to get it in the record. So it was an interesting bookender where you had, MPP Wynne come in the early times of the 2000s and then get, with her maiden speech and then be able to close it at the end. And so did all the others. But Dave, I agree with you that she enjoyed being an MPP. I don't think she missed the crowds of BlackBerry holding people around her and all of that sort of stuff. I remember giving presentations. I have to say this, when I was giving polling presentations, I once gave it to the Liberal caucus. I was called in to do it. And this is when they were in office. She was the only cabinet minister that attended. It was a really interesting thing. Everybody else is busy. She was there. She was there in the front row. I remember seeing her at a Markham event when she was, I think she was Minister of Transportation or something like that. And she was up there giving the speech, and there was no partisan bit at all to her. Like, not a single thing. Like, you oftentimes find cabinet ministers who would say something about the opposition or about what was going on. No, it was just straightforward talk. So first of all, it was just her. And I thought that that was a very poignant speech and a very poignant moment. On the other hand, the same leaders that say we shouldn't get into this are the same leaders that during their own campaigns just rip the face off of the other opponents. I mean, I understand that you try and be as nice as you can, and politics is a great thing. But juxtaposed her standing there, already ads running in the background about the Del Duca Wynne party, and how they spent us into the ground. And her team did the same thing to Doug Ford on the other side. So it's the only time that we really get to see that amped up view from opposition to the other side. It struck such a juxtaposition for me, where she was saying a lot of really poignant and important things, and yet on the other side, they're girding for battle or already out there doing what we expect them to do in campaigns, which is in fact to destroy the other side of the party and make sure people don't vote for them.
But isn't that what works?
Yeah, it does. Sure it does. And we know it does. And that's
Canadians,
the whole issue.
Respect the fact. I think when we saw Trudeau and basically using Doug Ford as a punching bag, that the campaigns, and then Ford does it back. But yet when they make big announcements together, they work together. So campaigning, I think Canadians can easily view the campaigning as that way. And even question period is just theater of the absurd a lot of days. So you get a lot of partisanship in there. But outside the House, and on times when it needs to be serious, we can see some respect for each other. It's still there. And Wynne was right. They need to build on that. They need to get back to more of that. That's all. Well,
the idea that you've got to run against something. So I think that's what campaigns have really been reduced to. We're going to run this an extended clip at the end of the episode here of On the Ledge. So don't leave, because I think there's an important part of Wynne's recollections and perspective on her experience in the House. And Keith, she lists off all of these characters from the past, and she actually cites the movie The Man Who Invented Christmas, and as he's as Dickens is writing his Christmas Carol, all of these characters kind of show up in the room as he's doing it, and this is how she kind of describes what went on in the legislature in Ontario, and these voices from the past, etc. Here's one voice that I don't think she recognized, I don't think she commented on, was Gerard Kennedy. And Gerard Kennedy was the guy who actually made her leader of the party.
Well, I don't know. I think Eric Hoskins had a lot to do with that as well. I'm not convinced that Gerard Kennedy. I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Well, it was his vote in that leader's vote, in that leader's race, and we were at the old Gardens at the time. I think it was it was Ryerson by then, crossing the floor asking why did he go to Kathleen, and that made a huge change in that leadership event that day. I realized Hoskins was there, but but it was that was the momentum.
Hoskins asked on the floor. To me, it was Hoskins going and pointing to Kathleen. That was my take. Isn't it funny how we have different recollections of that same night? I was just walking backwards trying to keep my keep my balance. But even at that, there are it's easy to point to, and it was great that she points out, Tim Hudak in the gallery, etc. And I don't want to make a big deal about this, but did I miss it? Was the premier not in the legislature yesterday for this? I don't know.
From the media, I didn't see of course, the speech live, but I didn't see him there. No, I saw Chris Elliott there. I saw those who were leaving and a few others, but no. Hey, let's go back to the. Thank you for reminding me about the leadership race, because we were all there. We watched it, and I was commentating stuff like that. And if as you recall, Sandra Pupatello seemed to have all the momentum coming into that convention, and she came up on the stage and she just strutted in such a way that I think people went, no way. Like, it was a performance issue, I think. And what struck me about Kathleen Wynne was, first of all, unexpected when she did win. But more importantly, when she made the speech, she was just Kathleen Wynne. Mm-hmm. Like, again, she was just like she was yesterday. She was just, people were expecting something more, and what they got was her. And I think, again, I've used the word juxtaposition 4 times now, but there was Sandra Pupatello, who should have won that night. All the momentum, all the piece came out there and gave a performance that was a little over the top. And yet Kathleen Wynne came out and just talked about what she was going to do. You remember that, Keith?
I remember during that campaign more than anything, we would say, you knew Pupatella was working a room. You didn't know Wynne was until you spotted her in there. But she was doing it more effectively. Pupatella was loud about what she was doing all the time and very effective. She was very effective. But I think John hit a point that it was just a little bit too strident. And Wynne was there and the momentum just went to her that night. And it did. It built in stages and she just walked up and she was so much herself, as she always was. And I must say, again, as premier, no matter, I followed her everywhere. I think I was at every stop she made pretty much for her time as premier. And she always pointed out the local MPPs, regardless of their political stripe, and rarely ever mentioned if they were in opposition. And she just said, so-and-so's here from, the local MPP. That's it. She was always respectful of others in these public settings. And again, I said it earlier and I'll say that she was just always a class act in these things.
Well, it's funny.
She could have the elbows out in politics, but
for sure. I mean, it's funny you guys should have that recollection of Pupatella. And I remember that speech for sure. But at the time I was at Global and we had editorial board meetings with all of the candidates who wanted to lead the Liberal Party. It's funny you should say that because Pupatella came into that meeting with the same posture as she did that night and gave the speech. Wynne, on the other hand, worked the room in the Global boardroom, right? And I hadn't been on the radio in about 3 years, and she said, "Dave, I miss your voice so much." Like all of a sudden, we were best friends, right? So it was really kind of interesting. And I come back to you, Sabrina, and we talk about the tone of all of this, and I don't expect that this is going to change anything necessarily in the Legislative Assembly, but I wonder whether or not Kathleen Wynne's legacy is going to be as important over the last 4 years as Kathleen Wynne MPP as it was Kathleen Wynne Premier of Ontario.
Yeah, I think she kind of acknowledged it a little bit too, her political highs and lows. She sat there in the House as Premier. She was relegated to, not even third party. They don't have status right now, procedurally speaking in the House. But it's important. And I think there's something to say about when you're no longer in the leader's seat. I don't know what it is, but politicians just get a lot more candid, a lot more charming. I remember Tim Hudak's farewell speech. You guys mentioned Hudak was in the House, and I was genuinely like cracking up in the gallery watching it. Like, it was great. It was so charming. And yet when he was, in the leader's position, it was, not so much that charisma that he had. So it's interesting also to compare Wynne to Del Duca, who kind of cracks the dad jokes, the self-deprecating humor about how he's, not so charming, not so charismatic, that type of thing. So it's really interesting how the tone just kind of changes when you are exiting politics. But I think, and maybe I can say, like, as a woman, if I can even put it that way, it matters to hear from someone like Kathleen Wynne. Like, her legacy is going to, policy-wise, the PCs have, undone a lot of her big, ambitious projects, taken away cap and trade, that type of thing. But I think for what she stands for, being the first openly gay premier, the first woman, it really matters, and in terms of representation. So here we have this moment of camaraderie, everyone, patting each other on the back, congratulations. And meanwhile, we've got attack ads coming from the NDP and the PCs this week as well. Like, I did think you guys are right. Doug Ford wasn't there in the House. It was sort of PC House Leader Paul Calandra, taking the lead on this, the special take note debate. It was his motion that spurred this whole thing. But, you're absolutely right. I think it's going to matter, her legacy to the party. And it's interesting because now her Don Valley West, the seat that she's managed to hold for so long, even when no one was voting, or virtually no one was voting for the Liberals, they were decimated in the last round, and she was one of the few that could hang on to it. That riding is basically competitive. It's in play now. There are big, high-profile contenders from the other parties. Mark Saunders, former police chief, Irwin Alman is running for the NDP. Saunders is for the PCs. The former child and youth advocate Alman running for the NDP there. And then the Liberals have nominated Stephanie Bowman, who I'm not sure a lot of listeners would know her. I mean, even in the party, a lot of grassroots Liberals don't know her. She's not very high profile. She's a banking executive, but now, Don Valley West being a longtime Liberal bastion is a little bit more in play now, I think, with Wynne's exit. So the Liberals are probably sweating this race a little bit as well.
Well, I did reach out to Kathleen Wynne this week. I just sent her a note congratulating her and said if ever she wanted to sit in on the podcast, she was more than welcome, and she said she would absolutely love to do so. So we're looking forward to having her on the show. And appropriately, let's just let her have the final word on this episode of On the Ledge. I'm Dave Trafford with Keith Leslie, John Wright, and Sabrina Nanji. Thanks for including us in your audio on-demand routine. And here are I think what was probably the heart of Kathleen Wynne's final speech in the Ontario legislature.
As I think about the after time and I tell these stories, I'm reminded of the story told by former Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador, Kathy Dunderdale. She told the story of the shopper in the grocery store who approached her after she had left office and said, "Didn't you used to be Kathy Dunderdale?" I think that's coming. But I am deeply grateful to all of you who have loved me and have supported me through the good and the pretty rough times. All of you who have been my staff, who have been part of my team, thank you so much. This is a team sport, if there ever was one. And without all of you, I wouldn't be here and we wouldn't have been able to do the work together that we did. So, on this particular day, I'm aware of my colleagues in this chamber. And I don't know if any of you have seen the movie The Man Who Invented Christmas, but there's a scene in it. It's the story of Charles Dickens when he was writing A Christmas Carol. And there's a scene in it when all the characters, the imaginary characters that he's writing about, are in the room with him. He's trying to finish the book, and they're there all talking at him, a cacophony of voices. And when I was thinking about this next part of my remarks, it feels like that, being in this room. It's like I can hear all the people who I've been here with for nearly 19 years. So it was pretty daunting to figure out who I was going to be able to echo. I'll always think of Dalton McGuinty as the boss. His decency and his calm were a model to his team. I watched Dalton from the back bench and then from across the cabinet table. He was unflinching in his commitment to the children of this province. He was unyielding in his determination to leave the province in better shape than we found it. The Greenbelt, a rebuilt school system, clean, coal-free air, they are all his legacies. I hear my own voice striving to extend that good work for children and for the adults they will become. I remember the pain of acknowledging and apologizing for the injustice and deep harm done to Indigenous children, robbed of their childhood and sometimes their lives because of residential schools. I hear myself apologizing to the people sent to the Huronia Regional Centre for the neglect, abuse, and exploitation that they suffered. I clearly hear the voice of Jim Bradley calling out to Howard Hampton from over there, brandishing a copy of Public Power before being shut down for using a prop again. Peter Cormos is on his feet on a point of order, challenging the House on standing order, who knows what, partly to prolong the debate, but mostly because he knows he can and he has it right. George Smitherman is on a rant over there, no notes, 19th century syntax in full flight. Sandra Pupatello is pointing a long finger of admonition across the width of 2 sword lengths. Deb Matthews is rising to her feet once again to disarm the opposition with her smiling intelligence. Liz Whitmer is rising slowly, delivering her searing question with infuriating calm. John Baird is just furious, red-faced and outraged, and then not, smiling in his seat, leaving us wondering what switch got flipped. Rosario Marchese is calling me Madame in a good-humored, withering rebuke with flair, implying, Kathleen, shouldn't you know better? And Dave Levac, speaker and school principal embodied in one. He's rising to calm the grade 7 class. Ernie Hardeman and John Van Toff and I met the King and Queen of the Netherlands, uncle, nephew, and premier. 3 party stripes, 1 sense of awesome occasion. John Fraser, steadily, loyally leading our crew for the past 4 years. John has a piece of my heart. He created space for me. He helped our tiny team coalesce. He helped us to punch above our weight with the very best good humor. I actually believe that Ted Lasso is fashioned after John Fraser. I actually believe that. And now he's passed the torch to Stephen Del Duca, whose strong, articulate voice has been here in the past and will be here again. There are so very many of you. You are all passionate about your work in your own ways. You bring your constituents' voices here, and you've brought your constituents themselves here time and again in a pre-COVID world. The advocates for Indigenous people, for children with autism, better housing, for LGBTQ rights, for municipalities, for businesses, support for farmers and nurses and education workers and PSWs, and all the people who hold our communities together and make them thrive. There are so many things to care about. And you do that. You do care, regardless of party stripe. You care about your constituents' lives. You care about their work, their children, their health. And I love you for that. I mean that. You mean the world to me, though we so often disagree.